welcome to Big Questions. If you're on your way in, feel free to just carry on going. The doors will just carry on being open. Welcome to Big Questions. It's lovely to have you, whether for the first time or you've been to a couple of the other ones that we've put on. Do grab a sandwich if you haven't already, and I hope you enjoy lunch. My name is Dorothy. I am a third year studying law at Trinity Hall. So many of you here. It's really lovely to have you. I'm also part of the Christian Union. And one of the things that we do as a Christian Union is put on events, particularly these type of events called Big Questions, where we provide a space to explore and think about and discuss some of the biggest questions of life, of faith, and life's meaning, and also the claims of Christianity. That's kind of what's going on today. I'm going to invite Zana up. Zana, do you join me? You can go up. Oh, that's nice. There you go. I'll join with you. Zana, you can use that. Zana, who are you and what do you do?
I'm Susanna, or Zana. I used to be a teacher, and I came here and I worked with Christian unions, student Christian unions, helping them to do events like this, to kind of think through life's big questions, think through what it looks like to be a Christian at university, and how that affects their life.
Cool. You mentioned briefly there, university.
Yes.
Briefly. So briefly, very briefly. Did you go anywhere particularly awkward for university?
Well, so I had to think about the admissions test for university, and I really didn't want to do an essay. So when I was thinking about applying for French and Spanish, is what I did, I was like, definitely don't want to apply to Cambridge because I don't want to do an essay for the admins test. So I went to Oxford, but I hope you'll still listen to me. Similar.
Yes.
In lots of different ways.
But there was something that you particularly got involved with at your time at that university, which is a bit maybe a redeemable quality about you. What
Just
was that?
one redeemable quality.
No, but go on. What was
I
that?
think you're talking about the fact I played sport.
Yes, what sport?
I played rugby.
Ooh.
Dorothy and I actually both play rugby, so there's a
Something we
theme
have in
on
common.
stage today.
Yes, there was something particularly interesting about your rugby career against Cambridge. Do you want to share maybe your experience with that?
So, yes, I don't know if I earned my place in the varsity team for the rugby because I was good or just because everyone else got injured. But I managed to play in this varsity game, and it was like one of the most traumatic experiences of my life. And every time I ran at their number 8, I thought I was going to be like absolutely steamrolled. The scoreline was not the most exciting thing for us to talk about. You beat me 53-0.
Oh. That's sad.
Yeah, that's me.
Sorry about that. And you're speaking a bit today, what about?
So we're asking the question, is Christianity more trouble than it's worth? Which is a great question, and I'm going to say a bit about this in a moment, but I basically think it's like a whole load of questions within one question, because why is it worth it? What does that mean? Why is it trouble? Why is anything worth it? What do we look for to kind of put our trust in? What do they have to give us back in return in order for us to kind of invest in that? So I'm going to be unpacking some of the different ways you can kind of view this question. I have not got very long, so I'm only going to begin to do some of that, but I hope that it'll be helpful for you as you listen along and then have conversations or ask me questions afterwards.
Cool. Go for it.
Okay.
I'll leave now.
Hello. It's really nice to see so many new faces as well as some familiar faces from last week. As Dorothy said, this is what I love to do. This is my job. I help student Christian unions to do events like this that think through life's big questions and examine whether Christianity has any relevance to those questions that we might ask. And today's question, is Christianity more trouble than it's worth? It's a really big one. Because like I said, I think it's quite a lot of questions within one. I think there's two main ways you might have kind of come thinking about this topic. On the one hand, I'd be surprised if most of us in this room didn't hear the words Christianity and trouble in the same sentence and then instinctively compile this kind of mental list of the failings of the church and ask, has Christianity done more harm than good? Has it done so much harm that it's not really worth it? Like there's no kind of integrity left in it and we should just do away with it. Or on the other hand, maybe you hear the phrase more trouble than it's worth And for you, that conjures up this picture of Christianity as effort, as bother, of personal cost. And you look around you at perhaps Christians and you think, why on earth would they align themselves with kind of old-fashioned countercultural views? Why would they give up their time to do Christian things when surely they could be having more fun? Or, why do they restrict themselves from certain experiences? Isn't that self-sabotage in a sense? And so you might be asking, what would Christianity have to offer in order for it to be worth it? I also think it's a really big question because behind either of those sets of questions come painful personal experiences. And so let me be honest at the front, at the start of this time. I don't know which question you've come expecting or hoping to hear answered today, and I don't know what your experiences of life so far have been, but I'm going to do my best to take us through this question, and I'm not going to pretend that I could say in 20 minutes all that could be said. So if I have totally missed the point or what you wanted to hear, then ask questions at the end, put them on the Slido, come and chat to me, or come back in one of the next 2 Fridays, because I'll be here every week, and I'd love to talk about this stuff more. So here's what we're going to do to answer the question, and you can track with me. First, we will ask the question, is Christianity really trouble? And then second, is it really worth it? So question 1, is Christianity trouble? It's the 15th of July, 1099. It's blisteringly hot in Jerusalem as 10,000 European crusaders break through the walls of the city. Then they break through the walls of the grounds of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and then they slaughter thousands of men and women and children. You don't have to be particularly familiar with Christianity to sense that there is something that is deeply wrong here. Didn't Jesus say, love your enemies and do good to those who persecute you? Or Galileo, a man of faith, seeks to understand the world around him and realizes that the earth rotates around the sun, not the other way around. His discoveries are true, but he is imprisoned, threatened with torture because he's a threat to the church. Didn't Jesus have a high view of truth? Didn't he say something about the truth will set us free? Or again, what about the slave trade? Why are there so many Christians who are not only complicit, but active within the slave trade? Didn't Jesus say he'd come to set captives free, that we must do to others as we would have them do for us? I could go on and give more examples, those are just 3, but the list of atrocities committed in the name of Christianity is long and it is shameful. But it's not just a historic thing, is it? Because the fact is that Christians and people claiming to be Christians still cause trouble today. Nor is it just a kind of external over there kind of thing. I am well aware that I'm a Christian and I have hurt people. I've hurt people by the things I've said and done and the things I've said or not said and done. I've done it in intentional ways and in unintentional ways. And I've also been hurt by Christians and people who are claiming to be Christians. I'm not trying to throw stones here. I just want us to acknowledge that we ought to be sad as we ask this question, sorry at the history of the church, because Christianity has been trouble. I wonder what your experience of Christians and the church has been. Maybe you've been put off by the hypocrisy of the people that you've met who've called themselves Christians. But before we write off Christianity because of Christians, we should ask what Jesus' message really was, what the central, defining message of Christianity is, whether the bad behaviour of some Christians does undermine that. Perhaps it will help to think of Christianity like a piece of music. By the way, the internet thinks that the most beautiful piece of music out there is Clair de Lune by Claude Debussy. Do you know it? If you don't, you can probably imagine it. Did anyone watch the first Twilight film back in the day? Do you remember, like, Bella goes to Edward's house? It's the piece of music that is playing when they're in his room. Edward Cullen, man of culture, ancient vampire. It's what helps Bella to fall even more deeply in love with him. So imagine if I played it. For reference, I played the piano for 1 year when I was 5 years old, and I was told to give it up because my teacher didn't think I would ever make any progress. Imagine if I played Debussy. Would Claire de Lune still seem so enchanting? Because I've heard it said by someone that to judge a piece fairly, we know to distinguish between the masterpiece that was written and a bad performance. You shouldn't judge Debussy by the quality of my performance. You should judge the quality of my performance against the quality of Debussy's original composition. Jesus wrote a beautiful composition. His vision for humanity is one that we all long for. There are 4 historical accounts written of Jesus' life, and at the start of one of them, written by a man called Luke, who was around at the time, we get this kind of manifesto statement of why Jesus has come. So I'd love you to grab one of these booklets. They aren't page numbered, which is a little bit unhelpful, but it's kind of page 6 if you just count through, or you find the one that says, "Is Christianity more trouble than it's worth at the top?" Luke records for us this. He says, he is Jesus, went to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. And on the Sabbath day, he went into the synagogue, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him. Unrolling it, he found the place where it is written, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favour." Then he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. Sitting down isn't the end of there, it's him kind of beginning to teach. The eyes of everyone in the synagogue were fastened on him. He began by saying to them, "Today, this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." So good news, healing, enlightenment, liberation, and celebration. That is why Jesus says he has come. He's not just a messenger, a moralist, or some kind of motivational speaker. No, these aren't just words. He makes this vision reality because he's powerful. And as people acknowledge that he's powerful and acknowledge his authority, they ask him about it. And he says, "Well, it's because I'm the Son of God." The freedom that he's come to bring, he claims, isn't just physical. As Jesus travels around teaching, he lifts up women, the children, the poor, the marginalised. He looks after them and gives them status in a radically countercultural way. He is always compassionate. He is never coercive. See, Christianity isn't just about rules or tradition. It's about this person of Jesus. Christians are called to believe in him, follow him, become like him as they live their lives. Jesus wrote a beautiful composition. So what does it say that Christians have played that tune so badly? Has it undermined his message? I don't think Jesus' message is undermined by the church's failure to live up to it. In fact, I think in some ways, Jesus actually gives us the most comprehensive framework for understanding the trouble of the church and trouble more generally in the world. In his teaching, Jesus called out the problem of evil both in the world and in people's hearts as well. He said the problem was worse than they could ever imagine, that no one was unaffected, no one could sort themselves out on their own. Jesus offered both diagnosis and cure. He identified the root of evil as turning away from God, but he said he was God, coming out to meet us, to restore that relationship, and to enable us to turn around and follow him and be changed. Yes, Jesus heals people. He did miracles, and we can talk about that. But this is the good news that he's talking about. Jesus promised change lives, but not quick fixes. He said people would gradually become more like him as they followed him. Not that they would cease to get things wrong, to do hurt, to miss his heart for the broken. As we tackle this question today, we shouldn't have a caricatured view of Christianity. I'll say a bit more in a moment. But it is true that Christians becoming more like Jesus have been a real force for good in the world. That is testimony to the power of authentic Christianity. But it would be slippery and overly simplistic to say that Christians who've done such unchristian things simply aren't Christian. There's a sense in which Jesus' message actually, that he predicts that Christianity will be used, will be appropriated to cause trouble. In fact, Jesus, as he kind of walked around and taught, he reserved his most scathing rebukes for religious leaders who use their status, use their position to oppress the weak. He knew that people love power, and as Christianity became a state religion, it gave people power, so that people appropriated Christianity to serve themselves, not to serve Jesus. I don't think that Jesus would be surprised by the history of the church. I think he would be grieved. I think he is grieved by it, angered. But least of us all would he be surprised. I actually think all of this only proves his diagnosis of the human condition. But it's also worth us just recognizing that when we ask the question, is Christianity more trouble than it's worth? We actually are judging Christianity by standards which Christianity itself has given to us. We're asking because we place a high value on love, on justice, on truth, on integrity, on human experience, human dignity, and those things, they aren't self-evident. I wonder who came here from Emma today, or Trinity, or Corpus, or Christ's. Walking around Cambridge, it's so easy to believe that we don't need Christianity. But the very foundations of the city that we live in find their roots in the Christian faith. Two books I found really helpful for kind of tracking this and thinking through the uniquely good contribution of Christianity to the world are these. There's this one, The Book That Made Your World. They're quite hefty, sorry, but you should read them. By Vishal Mangalwadi. And then this one, Dominion by Tom Holland. Now, from slightly different angles, both of these authors track the influence of Christianity on the world. And both of them say, you don't want to live in a world in which Christianity never existed. Let me put them down. The authors, they both say Christianity, it forms the basis of human rights. They come from the Bible, what is said in the Bible. And so does the value that we give to words, to truth, to history. The development of science, of technology, of medicine, of education, and in some ways even music. Those things didn't just happen by chance. They're founded on Christian principles. Vishal Mangalwadi is a Christian author. Tom Holland isn't. But neither of them would say that Christianity is more trouble than it's worth. So could it be that you haven't heard Claire de Lune properly before? Could it be that you've only heard the version played by a 5-year-old? Could it be that you don't know what authentic Christianity looks like? Can I invite you to investigate Jesus' message for yourself? Read an eyewitness account. Ask big questions. See what you think. But it brings us closer to that second question we're going to answer today. Is Christianity worth it? I'm not sure who it was that first said the hardest things in life are often the most worth doing, but I distinctly remember being told it when I was studying in Oxford. The relentlessness of deadlines, the reading list, the intellectually humbling process of tutorials, the general intensity of term. I found it hard. Sometimes I found it exhausting. But I'm still really glad I did it, because it made me who I am today. It taught me to think in new ways. Now, you guys, you're somewhere in the middle of that journey. But I wonder what you would say. Why do you bother with your degrees, or with early morning rowing outings, or the rest of uni life? why don't we all just give up and say, well, Cambridge, it's more trouble than it's worth, isn't it? For all of us, doesn't the answer ultimately boil down to because it's worth it? Or because in the end, I think it will be worth it? It's kind of like cost-benefit analysis, isn't it? And we do it with our degrees, but we do it more widely in life. We do it when we decide to go meat-free for environmental or ethical reasons, when we wear masks, or when we gave up, past tense hopefully, gave up certain freedoms to stay home, protect the NHS, and save lives. Behind every decision and every sacrifice, there is a value judgment, right? Something that says, we think this is worth it. And as we go through our lives, and as our actions stack up, they reveal something about what we're living for. And there's lots of things that we could be living for. So why would you bother with Christianity? Well, I've already talked about the uniquely good contribution of Christianity to society. And if I had more time, I would also tell you about the good historical evidence for Christianity, and specifically for the central defining miracle of the resurrection. But actually what I want us to spend some time on now is thinking about our need for Christianity. Because if we are convinced, if we think that we need it, that it has something to offer that nothing else can, then we will think it's worth any trouble. That passage from Luke, I don't think it's irrelevant to us here today, because Jesus' audience, it wouldn't be that dissimilar to this room. Many of them would have been wealthy and educated, and so as they heard Jesus proclaim the year of the Lord's favour, freedom for captives, they probably wouldn't have felt much like captives. I don't know whether that's your initial response too, or whether you do feel a little bit captive, if you're honest. Captive to the system, to the norms of thinking. Or perhaps you have felt that kind of restlessness, that there's more to this world than the material, but you don't really know what. Or that there's meaning in your pain and in your experiences that kind of naturalism just can't account for. Maybe you felt that frustration and despair at the evil in the world, the evil in yourselves, and the fact that you don't do what you want to do, even when you try to, and the sense of kind of shame that comes with that. Jesus says, believe it or not, feel it or not, admit it or not, we're captives to this problem of evil in the world, but he's come to set us free. He sets us free, so it's effort on his part, not on ours. He just invites us to trust him. And if we'll just take hold of him and trust that he really is God like he says he is, then he'll take hold of us. He'll deal with our captivity to evil through his dying a slave's death on the cross. And in return, he will share with us an everlasting future. Each one of us in this room will one day have to face the experience of death. But Jesus here claims that death is not the end. And that is pretty unique. That claim has been really significant for me as I've wrestled with the question of whether Christianity is worth it. I became a Christian as a teenager, and I just basically, as I looked at Jesus, thought what he said seemed to make sense of life, best sense, and I thought I needed him in my life. But my sense of the unique worth of Christianity has just deepened as I've got older, and life has got harder. I don't know if you remember how you felt the week of your Oxbridge interview. I do. It was a Monday in December, and my interviews were going to start on the Thursday, and they make you go up for a few days, so it's like a super intense process. And that week as well, though, my parents, it was a culmination of a bigger story. My parents had been going to the doctors for several years because they knew that there was a problem with my mum. Something wasn't quite right. And it kept being dismissed as something smaller or as a series of smaller things. And then eventually, she had an MRI scan just a few days before this Monday. And on the Monday, we found out that she had early onset dementia. So she'd just turned 50. She was the youngest person in the county to be diagnosed. She'd been studying Latin and French at Murray Edwards, And so she was super high functioning. And then they basically reckoned because she was high functioning, it actually gone on for a long time. She was kind of average functioning for it, and so no one really noticed. But that had kind of reached a new level, and so we could notice it now. And it's been a really long 9 years since then, and my mum is still alive, but now she needs 2 full-time carers. She can't move, she can't communicate, she can't even smile. And humanly speaking, that's really sad. But my mum trusts in Jesus, and so do my immediate family. And so we're not hopeless. We don't believe that my mum needs to live her best life now, because for her, the best is, and as has always been, yet to come. We all want to live for something bigger than us. But is there anything like this that can bear the full weight of our human experience and give us a hope that the best is yet to come? We're coming to a close, and in a moment I'd love to hear your questions, but before I do, perhaps I could just ask, do you want to be set free? Do you want to have your eyes opened? Do you want to have joy now and a hope in the face of death? Jesus comes and he says that he is proclaiming the year of the Lord's favour. He made that invitation 2,000 years ago to that room, but he also makes the invitation to us today. If Christianity is true, then wouldn't it be worth it? Wouldn't it be uniquely worth it and worth everything that you've got? Can I invite you, at the very least, to read about Jesus for yourself, to ask big questions, and to see why Jesus can set us, the captives, free? Dorothy, over to you.
I don't actually need this. Thanks, Anna. So as I said, now's going to be a time where we can just chat at people on tables. Do feel very, very welcome to disagree with anything Anna said, to chat about it, to eat biscuits, and as you will. We are slightly behind time, which means that the Q&A may go on slightly longer than 1:50. Do feel free to leave whenever you need to, if you have a lecture or supervision or anything. But if you have a question and you feel like it hasn't been answered, there are some feedback forms which you'll find on your table, and they can also be found outside on the table as you leave. We really don't want this to be end of conversation. We want questions to be asked. We want to really hear each other and listen to each other and ask these questions. So there are various ways that you can continue that conversation with us. You could fill out one of those feedback forms. You could ask to get one of those eyewitness accounts of Jesus' life that as Anna was mentioning. You could write a question down if you'd like someone to answer it. Or you could grab a book. There's a book at the back called Confronting Christianity, which asks some of the 12 biggest questions for the world's largest religion. And also something called Uncover, which is some versions of these eyewitness accounts, which you can grab as you leave. They're completely free. Do take them. But also do carry on chatting and putting questions on the Q&A if you're free to stay for a bit longer. Eat biscuits and chat.